In my Murrin, Burra everyone, which is Dunghutti for good morning. Thank you all for so much for being here today. And yeah, just being here today with us. So I am Elkie. My ancestors on my father's side are from the Yuin Nation, and we have really strong connections on the Dunghutti Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge that on my mother's side, and also my father's, there's European influences as well. I would like to acknowledge all the countries that were originally part of this nation that we now call Australia. Over 500 nations originally here and have been here for a very, very long time. I'd like to thank our elders in the past and also the present for being able to keep all of our songlines and culture and law as much as they have been able to during the struggles of the colonisation, which does still, continue, and acknowledge that their strength that they bring. I'd also like to acknowledge the beautiful landscapes on which we all sit as part of these elders and all Aboriginal people being able to care for their country. So thanks for coming again, and we'll be exploring the Reconciliation Action Plan that NADA has been going through. And today we're joined by our panelists. So we have Rachel Wallace, and she's the Aboriginal Program Manager for NADA. We have Naif Jamie Martin, and she is the Mental Health Peer Worker for ACON, and Hannah Gillard, the Project Coordinator for NADA. Welcome, guys. So today we're going to be exploring the Be a Voice for Generations with the theme for National Reconciliation Week for 2023. And National Reconciliation Week explains Be a Voice. Be a Voice for Generations encourages everyone to be a voice for reconciliation in tangible ways in our everyday lives where we live, work, socialise. And this webinar is one of those tangible everyday ways that participates us working to support reconciliation efforts in alcohol and other drug workspaces. Oh, welcome everyone. So we'll head into the questions. So if you'd like to, we'll just go around. Naif, would you like to start and just tell us a bit about yourself, your involvement in the RAP development and your related work in these areas?
Hi, my name's Naif Jamie, or NJ. I use she or they pronouns. I'm coming to you from stolen Gadigal land. I'm a mental health peer worker. I use my living experience to advocate for communities, my LGBTQI plus communities, my mob. I'm a descendant of Wiradjuri people on my mum's side. And yeah, I'm grateful to be here to speak on these important things and I guess highlight some stuff on the lived experience aspects of what it's like to come into these workplaces in these big systems and use our living expertise every day, and what that can feel like, what that can look like.
Hey everyone. So my name's Hannah. I'm the project coordinator at NADA, and my pronouns are they and them. So I chair the NADA RAP working group, which has developed NADA's 2023 to 2025 Innovate RAP. So that's going to be completed in August this year, and we'll have a launch event, which everyone will be invited to in September this year. So in my non-NADA work, I'm currently about to complete a PhD that's looking at the gap that can exist between policy and practice when it comes to LGBTQ plus inclusion work and ways to bridge that gap. I guess in the context of the discussion today as well, I wanted to recognise that particularly as a white person working in the Reconciliation Action Plan development space, I definitely don't see that work as any kind of endpoint to anti-racism work that I need to be doing daily. And particularly in terms of things like, paying the rent out of my wages every fortnight, doing the self-education work, following First Nations media, showing up at community events, and also volunteering where appropriate. So I definitely recognise that this is one part of a much larger range of things in my personal and professional life that I need to be being involved in.
Thanks, Hannah.
That would help. My name is Rachel Wallace. I'm the Aboriginal Program Manager at NADA. I am a very proud Wandjiwardian and Wadi woman from the Yuin Nation on the south coast of New South Wales. My pronouns are she, her, and before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the lands that I'm on today, to the traditional owners of, I'm coming from Wandjiwardian country, so I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. And to anyone in the room who may be Aboriginal as well, I'd like to pay my respects to your countries and your people. What was the question? I've been involved in RAPs for a few years now. I used to work for a member service Life with Wealth, so I was involved on their working group for their RAP, and I came onto the NADA RAP group back in 2018 as a member service rep. So, but now, I'm working at NADA. So I'm still on the NADA RAP group.
And so, Hannah, are you able just to talk us through, like, what is a reconciliation action plan? We know that it's an important document, and it's very helpful to have within an organisation. But are you able to talk us through about what that actually means?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, a RAP, a Reconciliation Action Plan, is a strategic planning document for organisations. So you might have an organisational strategic plan, and then the RAP is sort of a strategic planning policy document that sort of sets out tasks, deliverables, and dates associated with those deliverables to do reconciliation work within your organisation. So I'll talk a little bit about the different sorts of RAPs. I won't go into it too much because that's more in the ambit of the work that Reconciliation Australia does. But sort of broadly speaking, there's different levels of RAPs that you can have depending on the stage that your organisation's at in its reconciliation work. So the first sort of one is the Reflect RAP, and that's sort of more for organisations that are just starting out in the process, and that goes for about 12 months. And then you have other RAPs. You have next on the rung is the Innovate RAP, and that's the RAP that NADA started working at in its first RAP, and this will be NADA's second RAP that we're soon to be releasing now, and that's also an Innovate one. And then you, following that, it's a bit further, more progressed. You've got the Stretch RAP, and then the kind of the top sort of rung that you have is the Elevate RAP. And that's for organisations who have a really kind of high level of doing, that Reconciliation Australia talks about, a kind of high level of doing reconciliation work, or they've had a Stretch RAP before. So those are the sorts of different levels that organisations can be working on with their RAP work. So I guess I'll also talk a little bit about the RAP that we've been developing collaboratively in the NADA Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group. So as I mentioned, it's an Innovate RAP. It'll go for 2 years. And so in terms of like how we've developed it, that involved sort of the continuation of a RAP working group, which is constituted of both First Nations and non-First Nations people. We also have somebody on there, Tony, who does consumer advocacy work for NADA, who is a regular and brings really important experience, really important perspectives, particularly given his consumer advocacy work. And then, it also just involves things like developing a terms of reference, renewing the terms of reference, having quarterly meetings. So it's a very collaborative process. So in terms of like, if anybody's watching it and they want to know how to start developing a RAP, so you can head on over to the Reconciliation Australia webpage, and that has, the beginning stages of how to get involved. Reconciliation Australia sends you a template, and then it's sort of collaboratively talked about with the RAP working group. I also know sometimes people hire consultants to be involved in their RAP development. So yeah, it's essentially the other sorts of forms of support that Reconciliation Australia offers is you essentially pay a rego fee for assistance to develop your RAP. And then they've also got things like lunchtime sessions. So I guess speaking from my experience, it's been helpful to go to those like register, and then you can sort of see what kind of the work other people are doing, questions that they have from other organizations who are developing RAPs. And then also Reconciliation Australia has a conference that they hold where people sort of also talk about that kind of development process. So those are the sorts of things I've found helpful in terms of collaborative work with the RAP working group, developing NADA's RAP. Yeah, so that's kind of like an overview of the RAP development process, and also a little bit of insight into how NADA's been developing its RAP collaboratively with the RAP working group.
So thanks, Hannah. And when you just mentioned on the working group, and I know within the organisation that I'm currently working with, our working group has been, huge in being able to implement the RAP. But what are your thoughts on, how do you build that RAP working group and with the diversity and complexities and perspectives, especially in the AOD space? Naif, would you like to start us off with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like my experience with the RAP and this stuff is like I've been a part, especially my old role in the hospital, New South Wales Health. I was in a lot of like steering committees and, inclusion ongoing programs where we were doing this part where we were kind of going through the larger hospital system and finding and recruiting and trying to include lots of different people, people with living experiences, people, Indigenous people, queer people, service users, clinicians, all of the people, getting all of these different perspectives in a large big city hospital. And that's, as you can imagine, a really long, slow process. And I think it's really interesting to be a part of, because as I'm sure you all know, working in these spaces with lots of different people with different backgrounds, different experiences, it does take all types of people to collaborate on these things. And sometimes that can be difficult because you've got really big meetings with lots of people in them and lots of different voices and, service users who have negative experiences with the stuff, trying to amplify their voices and advocate, and then being met with a clinical model. It's a very interesting space to be in. And I think the thing I've learned and seen time and time again with that is just meeting all people with kindness and patience and understanding is the best way to create that inclusive, ongoing to get people involved and just validate people and thank them for coming, especially if they're identified roles or if they're living experience roles, like holding that little bit of extra space and grace that maybe, policy staff, steering committees isn't actually their, wheelhouse, but they're here and they're really trying to contribute within systems that maybe are still kind of existing under colonization or existing under, the fact that these people rock up and contribute, I think is a really big deal. And we should always acknowledge that, validate that, and work with that and hold that space for the human error of those situations. Because I think sometimes, especially with these, working parties, these big parties, sometimes some people can't make these every single meeting or event or contribute each time. And I think holding a bit of grace and understanding for that goes a really long way for having continuing helpful input to authentic plans and that are driven by the voices that should be centered.
Thank you, Naif. Hannah, how do you see the perspectives of the AOD space with developing the working group for the RAP?
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of that question about how we've sort of collaboratively as a group tried to encourage a diversity of perspectives, I know one of the discussions that we had in the working group was about just including a section in the terms of reference for the working group that was basically saying we are aiming and we endeavour to ensure that there's people from a diversity of services on the working group in addition to a diversity of people within those individual services, because there's a number of people from NADA member services involved, but NADA sort of is representing services across New South Wales and the ACT. So while there might be one organisation that's, you know, located in one specific area, the same organisation will be happening another place geographically in New South Wales too. So that was trying to sort of cover that as well. But in terms of trying to encourage diversity of representation too, I do know, you know, as per usual NADA policy, we have a policy that particularly if there's people from First Nations communities who are being involved in the working group and they're not doing it as part of their usual paid work time, that prep time for that meeting is paid for in addition to that representation on the group. And yep, so that's another way we're trying to just ensure that people are properly paid for the work that they're doing too, because of how important that is.
That's such, you know, like a valuable space that NADA holds within that, because a lot of times that goes unrecognised, you know, for the work that Mob does. Thank you. Rachel.
Hi. First of all, I would like to say, if you've got an Aboriginal staff member on working in the organisation, that it's not the Aboriginal workers' responsibility to lead up the working group. Like, you could ask them, but it's not an expectation that they should do. You know, if you've got one Aboriginal worker, you want to develop a RAP, don't think that, put that onto the Aboriginal worker, like speak with them. Also with a RAP group and a diversity, I think there should be different people from the organisations from different levels. So, like, you know, senior management down to workers, and an invitation kind of sent out to the whole organisation to join. And I really love at the Buttery that you mentioned once that he's got elders from the community that come in and sit on your RAP group. So that's, if you can do that, that's really good. And if you've got them relationships in the community, yeah, invite them onto the RAP group as well. Can't think what else I had to say, because you said a few of the things, you guys. So yeah, that's just diversity across the organisation. If you can get people from the community to come in and join, yeah.
Yeah, Nath.
I just wanted to add, I was reflecting,
Yeah.
and I think reflecting on both what Rachel just said and what Hannah touched on at the start, I think it's so true that, like, don't expect your Indigenous people to lead those projects. A really great form of allyship and tangible help that, you know, settlers can do in these situations is do some of that heavy lifting, is organize the meeting, is lead it, use your skill sets to help amplify these voices. And that is like tangible reconciliation work. I don't think, I think sometimes with identified roles, people think it's like, oh, they're going to do it and they're going to do all of it. And because we want to make sure, and it's like, you want to do it sustainably. You don't want to burn these people out. Sometimes these big systems especially chew up identified roles and spit them out. And something that allies can do, settlers can do, is rock up, you know, do that. The work that, I'll be first to say, I don't understand how Zoom or Teams works. Like, I love that there's someone who's amazing at that stuff and does that and holds that space for us to have these important conversations. That is really great reconciliation and allyship work. So, like, there are spaces for all people in these projects and plans. And I think that's kind of like, you reflected that, Rachel, and it touches on what you were saying, Hannah. And I think there is space for everyone, and it makes the work sustainable.
Also, you got to be committed. It's a long-term kind of thing. Like, you don't develop a RAP overnight. So there's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of meetings. And Hannah's done a great job in for NADA with the update of our RAP. But yeah, so just wanted to note that as well. So if you are going to put a RAP group together, just know you need a working group and it's going to take a while.
I know within the Buttery, it took us 2 years of just preparation work to make sure that we actually got ours to a place that we felt comfortable with, that we could, start to make these changes within the organisation. And we definitely touched in on the diversity that you guys are talking about, as well, to ensure that everyone had a voice. And I think the most important part is that, we are talking about reconciliation. So this isn't just the First Nations worker. This isn't just the First Nations people, or the Aboriginal people, taking, the first initiative in this. It's for everyone within that organisation to start picking up and, and having that voice towards coming together and reconciling what has occurred, across Australia. Yeah, Naif.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my little notes that I've written for each question, and yeah, like this question, I guess, there's a bit in it about like lived experience and inclusion and stuff like that, especially within AOD. And I think what I've seen within some bigger systems and in AOD is that, I mean, unfortunately, there still are some like negative stereotypes surrounding like, service users and particular communities. And I think we have to start from validating that that's a thing that still happens, and that we're still working towards changing and shifting the culture perspective on that. And from my peer work and lived experience perspectives, touching it and saying it actually really helps. Instead of being like, oh, these communities face higher, use of AOD or whatever, maybe be like, and it's because of the ongoing effects of colonization. And it's okay to say that. That doesn't change, it doesn't give all the power over to the service user. It's still, the system still exists. It doesn't change anything, but it actually goes a really long way for shifting culture perspectives on why some of these groups might be using things in those ways to cope with the ongoing intergenerational traumas. And it's okay to touch that stuff, and it's okay to say it. We're in this interesting point in history where we're able to acknowledge that we need to do more work, but we can touch all parts of it, as well as just like acknowledging the land we're on. We could acknowledge that it's stolen, and we could acknowledge that these groups face these things. And I tell you what, like people who have those experiences, that goes a really long way for authentically validating those experiences and getting great, then they will open up and share the wealth of their knowledge, because they're coming from a point of feeling equal. Yeah, I just wanted to share that because I've seen that a lot in big systems.
Thanks, Naif. And that, that just reminds me that acknowledging, what's occurred and acknowledging that colonization process until we can actually sit there and do that reconciliation can't be made. That acknowledgement of issues that have been, have occurred and are continuing to occur. Without that recognition and acknowledgement of that happening, there can be no reconciliation. So, and I guess that's part of, my takeaway, Naif, is just, that constant reminder of that, that recognition and acknowledgement of things, to start that reconciliation process. And, those working groups being able to put these together is fantastic. Naif, what sort of takeaways are you taking away from today?
I guess like my takeaway is like, yeah, I feel like it's been really interesting to hear everyone else's perspectives. And yeah, like I agree with what Rachel was saying. Like it's a big commitment. It takes a long time. And I also found when I was in these groups, I would get a bit burnt out, a bit kind of not, yeah, like I don't have all the answers, but it is a long slog. And like, we have to find ways to make these things sustainable because they are kind of slow moving. And, validating that and checking in with all the people in your, on the RAP or in your steering committee, or just being like, I don't know, maybe sometimes meeting in person if you're able to, or just things to change it up and make it accessible and sustainable over time, because I think it can be, you can kind of click into this like almost checking out and doing it kind of mentality. And I think we do need to be passionate about this because it is important, and we do need to be, focused, and we don't want to burn out each other. And I guess the other takeaway would be for me is like, respect the differences between, if you're a settler and you're using this valuable living experience of people, respect those differences and validate them and acknowledge them, and respect each individual, because also like you can expect the differences between groups of people, but also, there's people can have different individual experiences of, being an AOD or using services or being mob, or they're all going to be really individual as well. So asking the people you're working with, like, what can I do? How can I best help? How do we make this sustainable for you? I think they're really great questions to be asking, not just to identified roles, but to all people within your RAP, to make these things effective long term.
Hannah, what are your takeaways from today?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that kind of in relation to that point that we've been talking about around the importance of, for me, like as a white person doing reconciliation work, particularly the importance of recognizing the ongoing impacts of colonization in everyday life, and in any kind of engagement that I have with the term reconciliation, learning more about that and recognizing the way that plays into the present is definitely one of the takeaways from today. Another sort of thing that I was going to talk about was, I guess, just for people that are interested in developing reconciliation action plans, in terms of my involvement with the RAP working group has been just leaving plenty of time for it. And I know we've kind of chatted a little bit about that, but just to, I guess, because I also sort of work in project management, so I might talk a bit in project management terms, I'm sorry, but sort of, the kind of recognizing all the different moving parts of reconciliation action plans. One part is obviously how incredibly important it is, the consultation work, the sort of ongoing work of making connections and relationships to, develop with people who might be interested in being on the reconciliation action plan working group. And that's an ongoing thing that NADA is doing now. So soon we're going to release an EOI for the NADA RAP working group, just to make sure that people are continued interested in being involved and having that space for new people to come on if they're interested. I think also, with the NADA RAP, we had, so there's 5 sections of the NADA RAP about things like respect, recognition, governance, what NADA's vision for reconciliation is. And so for each 5 parts of that, we discussed 1 part per meeting for the development of the RAP. And so each meeting happened about every 1.5 to 2 months. So, providing time for that to happen. And then also, if anyone who's involved in RAP development, considering things like planning, after those meetings have happened, there's things like to consider in relation to graphic design, providing time for that. In terms of like an artwork. So NADA's been working with the artist Carly Stewart to develop an artwork for the NADA RAP. So providing time for that to happen, and the liaison, the consultation work around that is really important. And then things like printing of the RAP, and, developing or like thinking about the RAP launch as well and planning for that and who the speakers might be. And then obviously the next phase as an ongoing work of implementing the RAP and making sure there's accountability there, because the kind of primary theme of the NADA RAP is accountability. So making sure that those sorts of actions that are put out in the RAP, working towards making sure that they happen. So I would say, that in relation to that specific takeaway would just be to provide plenty of time for anybody who's interested in developing a RAP. Developing relationships takes time. It's really important. And then also the kind of logistical aspects of RAPs as well.
Thanks, Hannah. And Rachel?
Yeah, I want to echo what you both said, but I really love that, Nath, about having a First Nations person on your RAP group who is with lived experience, who's a consumer of your service, would be great to have on your RAP group, because they can, you know, give input from their point of view of being a consumer of your service. If you're thinking about starting a RAP, I think first you start, if you don't have those relationships in the Aboriginal community, I think going out and starting to develop relationships and meaningful relationships within the community, I think that's very important. I had one more note. Also, I think about, because I know how our AAD services are, and sometimes we don't have the capacity, but if you start developing the RAP, ensure that you got the time to commit to it and meet your the areas of the RAP. So yeah, I made notes, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, the relationships, go out and start developing relationships in the community is a big one, I would say, in a takeaway message.
And is there anything further that Nath, Hannah, or Rachel that you would like to add? Any further thoughts that you'd like to share as part of this RAP working group? Hannah, I noticed that when you mentioned, the artwork side of things and taking that time to collaborate with that. So within the Buttery, we took, it took a considerable amount of time for us to actually be able to put that part of it together. And we actually, when we found our artist, Caden Powell, he sat down with all of us who happened to be a whole heap of aunts. And, as a group and a collective, we spoke about, what that reconciliation means for us. And he was able to, individually and as a group and within the Buttery and, what we wanted from our RAP. And he was actually able to put together this absolutely beautiful piece of artwork that not only collaborated within what he heard from our own personal experiences and also from within the Buttery, within the organisation, but was able to put in, his experiences as well. And, what came out of that was this beautiful piece of artwork that has so much meaning in behind it. Yeah, and I was hearing that you were, doing that as well. With your artwork for NADA.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check out. So is that on the current RAP for the Buttery?
Yeah.
Amazing, I'll check it out. Nath, I'm not sure if you wanted to go first on this question or you're okay.
I feel pretty okay. I feel like I gave all my reflections in the takeaway part.
Yep. I guess I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's been involved in the NADA RAP working group, and also for all the people who have come onto the panel today, particularly Elke, Rach and Nath. It's been such a privilege to have these discussions with you. And yeah, it has been a sort of, it's been a really involved process for the development of the NADA RAP. So yeah, a particular shout out to the people who've been involved with the NADA RAP working group, given up their time. Some people might not have been able to come to meetings, but then they'd pop up and they'd be able to sort of sit in on a meeting or offer to sit in on a meeting with artists. That was one of the things that we were, part of the development of the NADA RAP too. So thank you for those people, even if they couldn't come to meetings, that their involvement in other ways has been so appreciated. I also just wanted to mention there has been one member service who sort of reached out, who has an interest in, and there's definitely, when I've chatted with some other people on the NADA RAP working group, in potentially developing an industry working group in alcohol and other drugs for, essentially it would be, I should say what more about what this is. So it would be an industry working group is something you can kind of register with Reconciliation Australia. And so it would just be for any kind of alcohol and other drugs bodies who want to come together as a group or, be connected to support each other with the RAP development process. So I wanted to say, anybody who's watching today who has an interest in doing that, please reach out to me or really any NADA colleagues and they can put you in the right direction. But my email's hannah@nada.org.au. And I'm just trying to sort of scope, even after this, obviously after this webinar has sort of been recorded, just to sort of scope if there's interest in that, and then that could be another way we could support each other in RAP development. So please do touch base about that if you're interested.
Fantastic, Hannah, thank you. And Rachel, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Not that I can think of. I wasn't expecting that question.
Sorry to throw that one in on you. So thank you, Hannah, Nath, and Rachel for going through this process. We're going to open it up to Q&A now. So I do notice that we've got some questions coming through. So please feel free to type those into the box and into the chat box, and we'll get to those. So the first question we had that was pre-submitted, do you have any thoughts on how to survey and assess staff cultural knowledge and learning needs for within the RAP?
That is actually a very good question, and is something I would like to see happen or develop. Yeah, I haven't got an answer for that, but I know, like, how do you know that? Like you can send the person away to training, but, you know, does that have any impact on their work? And I'd be happy to get back to whoever's put that question in and discuss further. Give me a bit of time to think about it, because that's something I'd like to see happen.
What was the question again, Elkie?
Do you have any thoughts on how to survey and assess staff cultural knowledge and learning needs as an item within the actual RAP itself?
I guess one way you could find out or is on, service users when they do their exit surveys or stuff like that. That's probably the best way I've found reflections on areas that we need to improve. I guess that seems to be a pretty good indicator on how, especially when there's Indigenous people using the services and they're reflecting stuff back, and it's like, okay, cool, so we need to work in these areas, we need to improve here. Is one way I've done that in the past.
So the next question that we've got submitted here, now this one's come through as anonymous, looks like they all are at the moment, so I'm not sure who it's from, but thank you so much. Is there any guidance on how many people should be on the RAP working groups? I work in an organisation with only one First Nations people.
I would, if you've got one First Nations worker on your team, I think that's probably an opportunity for you to open up to your service that you work with or community members to come in and join your RAP group, to have that, First Nations people's input into your RAP would be one thing I would suggest.
Yeah, I agree with Rachel. Just that's when you go into community, find those people with living experiences and hold some space for some people at the table. And then that's also a really good opportunity for some, settlers, white people, to do some of that, admin lifting of the RAP and the group, to not, if there is only one First Nations person in your org, yeah, don't pull them in all these different directions. Just, work with them.
In relation to, I guess, the logistical aspect of that question, I know there's sort of like Reconciliation Australia has a sheet on reconciliation action plan working groups, and they recommend about 15 people around that number, I think 15 to 20 kind of max on the working group. And yeah, definitely part of the kind of the RAP and also the requirements of the working group is to, obviously to include, ensure there's proper representation from First Nations communities as well. So in terms of like the logistical number, it's about, I think, 15 to 20 people.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through to make sure I don't miss any. Thanks so much to everyone for your cultural guidance, leadership and expertise on how to develop the wrap. So that's more of a statement, I feel, than a question. Thank you, guys. Really informative webinar. Thank you, everyone on the panel. And Rach, how has it felt for you that you didn't have to do this?
What
Sorry.
webinar? No, no.
how has it
You
felt
have to.
you
No.
didn't have to
Sorry.
Nada?
Pardon?
Now, I don't know if the question's a bit badly worded or it's my interpretation of it, but Rach, how has it felt for you that you didn't have to do this for NADA? So I guess, you know, maybe they're meaning, you know,
Yeah.
you stepping into this as a voluntary. And how has that felt for you?
NADA is so supportive. I love working at NADA, but I think if I would have gate crashed the RAP meetings anyway. So if I wasn't involved in the RAP group, I was only joking. But yeah, no, they're very supportive and they ask. Yeah. But I was already in NADA RAP before I come in, so I kind of thought I want to hold that.
Yeah.
I hope
Okay.
that answers it. Yeah.
Hopefully, if not, they'll post it back up with another follow-on question. So, guys, is there anything else, and anyone from the audience would like to open up with any other questions? Sorry, I've just got a note here to say that there's one other question, and it was a statement, and I was sort of avoiding it, so I didn't step into my own shame. But it's got there, Elke, you've done an amazing job facilitating this webinar. Well done. So there we go. You'll get to see me go bright red. And I can't see any others. Maybe if I close it and open it back up, I might see. Ah, there it is. In regards to the RAP and the AOD services specifically, how do you think it can change the service on a practice level?
I guess in terms of my involvement with the RAP working group and like looking at the kind of draft NADA RAP, it's some of the things I've noticed in terms of my personal involvement in it has been, you know, some of the actions involve things like, you know, planning events for NAIDOC Week or Reconciliation, National Reconciliation Week. So I guess kind of like, and some of the times we have reached out to some services to sort of see if they're doing events, like for instance, in relation to National Reconciliation Week. So it has sort of, I think, you know, moving into the future and implementing that will help develop those relationships further as well. But like in terms of what I've learned from the RAP, also learning things about one of the items in the RAP is about, you know, working to source whether it's sort of goods or services from First Nations community controlled organizations. And I've definitely, like in the RAP working group, we've talked about the dynamics of sort of working to ensure that there is proper kind of, there is First Nations control of those organizations, and how to sort of, you know, working to ensure that is the case, that the as well. So it's, I think that's sort of also been another way that it can sort of change AOD services, is sort of supporting First Nations businesses, you know, connecting with other services around community events. Those can be another way, tangible ways that it changes things on the ground that I've noticed in terms of my involvement with the RAP working group.
Yeah, Rach.
I just think it's important that our AOD services do a RAP. I do know of other services who've done it differently, and it's been awesome. And I don't want to talk too much about it because I could identify that service. But, you know, the impacts of colonisation and the transgenerational trauma for First Nations people, they're going to be our clients. So our services have got to be culturally safe for people that comes in the door. In regards to reconciliation, I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to see real reconciliation, and we can see that at the moment with what's going on with the vote for yes to Parliament and how that's going. So we're on a journey to reconciliation, and I'm happy that we're all on this journey together. Yeah, so I want to say thank you to the services who are on this journey and the workers. So thanks. I hope I said that correctly, how I wanted to say.
You put it really well, Rachel. Like, honestly, I think I couldn't have said it better. I think the practical, it changes the service on a practical level because it's the pointy end, it's the first point of the policy change to then flow on affect culture change within your workplace. So it's important like work, because this is the steps towards these bigger things like genuine, real reconciliation that unfortunately we probably won't see in our lifetime, as Rach touched. But it's how you shift these stereotypes. It's how you change like institutionalized racism. It's massive work, and these, you know, working in this kind of area, and it feels a bit like, oh, just meetings and stuff, but the flow-on effect is that it changes culture, it changes perspective, and it centers voices that need to be centered, and that is working towards genuine equality and not just tokenism. And we're at this interesting point in history where we are acknowledging things and we're knowing that we need to work towards them. And it's interesting because sometimes it is hard to see the bigger outcomes or the longer perspective, but it's important work and everyone has a role, because the flow-on effect of it is it affects everyone. And as Rachel said, a lot of our people are using these services, and that's why these plans are so important.
We also talk about stigma in AHD, but sometimes you got to stop and think that Aboriginal people who may use drugs or alcohol, Aboriginal people get two lots of stigma. The stigma because they're Aboriginal and stigma because they're using drug and alcohol. So that's another thing to remember. So it is hard for them to come into your service if there's no Aboriginal community controlled one in their community, or if they can't use the local Archos service because they got family in there, or, you know, they got close connections, and so they may choose to use a mainstream one for that reason. So making sure our services are culturally safe for the people who do, for the Aboriginal people, First Nations people who do come and access your service, and reconciliation, you know, developing a RAP. And as Nave said, not a tokenistic one, actually doing the work that you said you were going to do in it is important.
Yes, the tokenistic, you know, and making sure that real work is happening in behind is, I think, the key, along with acknowledging, you know, to start this process. So Michelle Ridley has said, great work, everyone. Elkie, Nath, Rach and Hannah with a smiley face. And we've got another question here from an anonymous attendee. Could you give us any advice on how to influence big bureaucratic organisations to implement a RAP?
What's her name? Let us know. We'll go. Only joking.
Yeah, who do I need to talk to?
Yeah. Me and Nate will be there soon.
I would politely touch on the systemic kind of racism that big organizations perpetrate by just existing. I'll somehow frame that in a way that's like, that's how I would try and get a big organization like that to be like, and this is how you would work towards not being that. But you would probably maybe word it a bit kinder than I just said.
I think like in relation to that kind of big bureaucratic influencing behavior, I know that on the in terms of like having RAP, so there's kind of like there's typically like within RAP working groups, there's a RAP chair, some RAP champions, and the RAP champions, it's mandatory that Reconciliation Australia has specified it's mandatory that the RAP champions come from management as well. So I think that kind of requirement means that you do need to involve people who are in senior management in your RAP working groups. So I guess that's part of that sort of trying to influence that change. But I guess at NART, like I understand NART is a sort of smaller organization, so I'm limited in terms of what I can, in terms of my perspective there, but definitely like part of the RAP process is meant to be about doing it across the organization and that dispersed responsibility. So I guess in terms of like, yeah, in terms of that kind of big bureaucratic change, the specification that there needs to be as RAP champions within RAP working group, senior leaders in that role, I guess is one way that Reconciliation Australia, I guess, is trying to do that work of that kind of larger bureaucratic work. But and I can't speak to that kind of communication. Like, I think that's that kind of communications element of, you know, how to ensure that all people in the organization are aware of it. But I guess at the NADA level, it's looked like, you know, sending round drafts of the RAP to staff, and then also like sending meeting minutes to the board, sending draft RAPs to the board, to try and get that dispersed responsibility, even though I recognise we're a small organisation, but then we also represent New South Wales and the ACT too. So yeah, I guess definitely having that kind of senior leadership involvement in the RAP working group, and then involving people at the development stage. So it doesn't come as sort of like a sudden thing that now the RAP is starting and, you know, these are your responsibilities. People have been knowing about it from its development stage, is I guess my perspective.
Thanks, Hannah. And Julie Diggin. I agree that having a RAP is a good framework to hold us accountable for improvement in this area, that having an informal approach without a RAP wouldn't achieve in the same way. Any reflections on that one?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So Julie Diggin has just put in a statement here. I agree that having a RAP is a good framework to hold us accountable for improvement in this area, that having an informal approach without a RAP wouldn't achieve in the same way.
I think that if that's the service I was talking about, they've got a high number of Aboriginal board members. So I think they really drive what happens in that service, and what they deliver on the ground. So that was probably around that. If that was about that comment, then I mentioned there, you know, about a service not having a RAP, they're just actually being told by the board to do the work. And yeah, I'm not sure if that was it for that, but yeah, just thought I'd add that.
Thanks, Rach.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the way Julie put that it's a framework for accountability, because that's what it is. The things that have happened through colonisation, absolute atrocities, and this is a process of accountability for that. And I think this is kind of the big policy spearhead of that. And I think making sure you practice that accountability and decolonisation practice at all times in your life, in your work, is how you do it authentically. Not just when you're in the meeting, but like when you're working with mob and the distressed or, you know, difficult, sit with that discomfort, and it's okay, because like that is being accountable for these things that have happened and are happening. And we can sit in these meetings and work towards these big things, but also like it's real tangible work that we're doing all the time. And that's true accountability, and that's true reconciliation. And yeah, I really, really like that reflection, Julie. Thank you.
I did too. I agree with both Julie and Nath as well.
Yeah, and that authenticity, Nath, great wording of that, is because the RAP then doesn't become just a document on paper. With that authenticity, it then becomes that living and doing, and that's where that real reconciliation and change happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hannah, did you have any thoughts on that one?
Just looking at that. What was the reflection again? Oh, right. So in relation to setting, I mean, yeah, in terms of my role in, in terms of, that's definitely something that's sort of appreciated, having the kind of timeframes. And I know Reconciliation Australia specifies the specific timeframes that you need to have for doing actions. And I definitely think that kind of the way that RAPs can allocate responsibility to particular people, set timeframes, have specific things that are to be done. I definitely find it helpful in my work. And and definitely in improving my work constantly, which is an ongoing process for me. Yeah, so I definitely find that kind of structure. Also, I'm a policy person, so I love, yeah, I love having that kind of structure. I find that really helpful, and also as a reminder to, you know, when there are important cultural events coming up, I have found that structure helpful to sort of as a prompting to make sure that there is some, you know, checking in about what people might be interested in doing as well. I found that really helpful.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we've now run out of time. So we'll need to wrap up the webinar for today. So Nada will pass on any other questions that have been left there to the presenters and provide an answer over the next couple of days. I can't see any others there at the moment, but if any others pop up. Thank you all. Well done. This from Anonymous. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Elke. And so we'll send out a short evaluation survey for people. So if you could please complete it after you watch the webinar today, that would be great. And also just head over to nada.org.au to check out some of the other resources. So for instance, Rachel was collaboratively involved in developing a guide that you can find on the NADA website, which is about creating more culturally safe spaces if it's a non-Aboriginal alcohol and drug service. A resource people can check out in addition to lots of other things like the newer NADA Language Matters Guide to support people with their alcohol and the drugs work. So if there's other resources you'd like to check out on the NADA website, you can do it there.
And also we can offer a cultural audit on a service along with by myself and someone from the Aboriginal Corporation Drug and Alcohol Network, ACDAN. So we can come in and do a cultural audit and provide some advice around on areas of the audit to support your service in creating a culturally safe place for our mobs to come in and access your service and feel culturally safe in your service.
Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great day.